So welcome to our second episode of the vlog.
Yay!
I'm here with Brian Cuban and I'm Shauna-Kaye Spencer, and welcome today. I feel like I know you. I read your book.
Oh, thank you. You're the one.
Yes. I feel like I know you so well. Like, I feel like I know you more than I know my closest friends.
Well, it's good to be back here at Pitt Law.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. I was here a couple months ago, but that was the first time I'd been back since I graduated.
Really?
In '86.
I'm
yes.
sure it looks very different.
It does look different.
Does Oakland look different too?
Oakland looks a lot different. And no, I had been back to Oakland.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, in
Right,
Mount Lebanon,
right,
so
right.
I'd been to Oakland before
Okay.
since then, but I hadn't been in the law school.
Okay. Does your family still live here?
My mom still lives in the house we grew up in.
Okay,
in
wow,
Mount Lebanon,
that's
sure.
exciting. That's exciting. So, we want to talk a little bit about your book.
Sure.
What led you to addiction and your struggles with depression?
The path to those issues started here in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Growing up in Mount Lebanon, and I was the middle of 3 children, and I was a very shy child. I was very middle child syndrome, and I wore negative things that were said to me like kind of like a suit, and
Right.
these comments became who I was.
Right.
And unfortunately, I had a difficult relationship at home. There was a lot of fat shaming. That is not to blame my parents or anything, because
Right.
parents do not cause depression, addiction, or eating
Right.
disorders, but the home environment can have an effect,
Right.
because we know cause and correlation are two different things. It does correlate with mental health issues. And then there was bullying in my high school. I was physically assaulted, and all of these things kind of came together to the point where I would look in the mirror and just saw this horrendous, quote unquote, fat pig, as I would be called in high school. I was an overweight child. And that led to the development of an eating disorder,
Right.
anorexia, in 1979. I would later transition to bulimia.
Right.
And this was at a time when eating disorders weren't talked about for men or women.
Right.
The singer Karen Carpenter would die from complications related to anorexia in 1983
Right.
and bring eating disorders into the pre-digital national spotlight,
Right.
but also kind of cement eating disorders as something that only women went through,
Right.
not guys. Guys don't get eating disorders. And that is a stigma we still fight today, even though about 25% of all those with eating disorders are male.
Right.
And you might be surprised to learn that according to the study of law student well-being, about 25% of law students suffer from some sort of disordered eating activity. Disordered
wow.
eating, about 25%.
Wow, that's so heartbreaking to hear.
Yes.
Did you know that you had an eating disorder?
I had no idea. I did not realize I had an eating disorder until I was in my 40s.
Wow. Okay.
But what I did know is that these were disorders. When I binged and purged, it gave me a feeling of peace for a few seconds, and it gave me a feeling of being loved, that I would be loved, and that the next day
Right.
everything would be okay. And I was engaging in this act that I didn't understand, binging and purging.
Right.
But when that feeling went away, the shame came in and filled the void.
Right.
The shame of engaging in an act that instinctively I knew that men didn't do.
Right.
We just didn't do those things, and it
Right.
was shameful, and I shouldn't tell anyone.
Right.
And this was at Penn State.
Right. I went to Penn State too.
All right. My sophomore year, and I turned 21, and I transitioned into drinking,
Right.
because if I couldn't change how I felt through binging and purging, I would mute how I felt. I wouldn't feel anything.
Right.
And before I knew it, I was becoming intoxicated all the time, and I was getting
Right.
drunk. I was going to class drunk. I was have to get drunk just to leave the house, and I became a quote unquote alcoholic.
Right.
As a student at Penn State, I was a binge drinking alcoholic, and I also began running excessively. I developed exercise bulimia. I
Right.
was running 10 miles a day, 20 miles a day,
Wow.
because if no one was ever going to love me, I might as well just do things I could do alone
Right.
and be by myself. So at Penn State, I was binging and purging, running 10 to 20 miles a day. I was a problem drinker. That's a lot of stress on the body.
Right.
There were days I was so dehydrated and weak I couldn't get out of bed.
Wow.
I wanted to be a police officer.
Right.
That would have worked out well, right? And so I had no thoughts about going to law school. But what I wanted was not to have to leave school, because if I leave school, then I have to show people who I really am.
Afraid of the real world.
I was afraid of the real world, not because there are adults in the real world, but
Right.
because I had ownership of all these mental health issues that belonged to me.
Right.
And if I walk out in the world, they no longer belong to me, and
Right.
people are going to be ashamed of me and make fun of me. They're going to think I'm this fat pig from high school, and nobody was going to love me or hire me or whatever. One day I'm sitting in the placement office at Penn State looking through police officer jobs,
Right.
and there are these two guys talking about going to law school. They're from Pittsburgh, talking about going to Pitt Law. I had never thought about going to law school
Mm-hmm.
before that moment. I started thinking about it sitting there at that table. The bells started going off in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Not the bells of, hey, I could be a lawyer, this is a good career. The bells of, I could stay in school for 3 more years,
Mm-hmm.
I can binge and purge, I can run 20 miles a day, I can drink,
Right.
and I don't have to show my true self as I saw it to anyone.
Right. You don't have to go into the real world. You
That's
don't
right.
have to. You can stay in school and do what you used to do.
I could survive
Exactly.
because my mental health issues were about surviving day to day.
Right.
Now at Penn State, it's not like law school, you get graded
No.
on a percentage, right? So
Right.
I was able to, for my classes, pull all-nighters before exams and to get not great grades, but decent
But
grades.
You passed.
And so I decided that I was going to apply to Pitt Law and take the LSATs.
Mm-hmm.
I took the LSATs, I got into Pitt Law,
Mm-hmm.
and I walked into Pitt Law the first day, 1983,
Wow.
walked through those doors as an alcoholic,
Yes.
as someone with 2 eating disorders, someone who was clinically depressed, and somebody who was not in treatment for any of it.
Right.
Someone who did not have any concept of what that meant
Right.
to even be in treatment. Someone who did not have any concept of having a problem.
Right.
And as you might expect, that is not a very good resume for success in law school.
Right. Law school's hard on its own, much less add all of those things.
I learned that you cannot just pull an all-nighter before a law school exam and
Right.
get good grades. At least I couldn't.
Right. I don't think
Okay,
anybody
maybe
can.
somebody can, but it wasn't me.
I don't think
Okay.
anybody can.
Yes, I was not in that elite class of people who might be able to do that. And so my grades at Pitt Law were not very good. I was showing up to class hungover and drunk. I would miss class.
Wow.
I did my 1L moot court intoxicated.
Right.
And I really just, again, survived day to day and just scratched through Pitt Law in a way that I shouldn't have, and with no resources that I knew about were available to me. This was a different era.
Right.
At Pitt Law, in 1983, 84, those years, the student lounge, we had happy hours every Friday in the student lounge.
Right. I've heard of that down there. Yeah.
with a DJ and hard alcohol.
Wow.
So
Different time.
different
You would
times.
not find that here on a Friday.
It was a different time, a different, I want to say a different culture, because there's still a culture of drinking, not just Pitt Law.
Right.
There's still a culture of drinking, but law schools have just gotten smarter about that stuff like that,
Right.
liability-wise too.
Right.
So I know they don't do that anymore, but we did that, and
Yeah.
I kind of just coasted through Pitt Law, just trying to survive with my mental health issues, and
Right.
I couldn't even tell you who the dean of students was then.
Wow.
To me, the dean of students was somebody I'd never wanted to see.
Right.
Okay, because that meant I was in trouble or
Right.
something. So I don't even know who the dean of students was. I wasn't anybody who was going to be big law,
Right.
right? I wasn't law review.
No.
Yeah. And so I had and I never wanted to be a lawyer. So
Right.
I had no concept of what was waiting for me after Pitt Law. I was so ashamed of who I was in my 3 years at Pitt. I didn't even go to graduation. I said, just mail it to me.
Really?
Just mail it to me.
Wow.
And so I graduated from Pitt,
Right.
not in any kind of recovery.
Right.
I took the Pennsylvania bar. I don't
Right.
know how I passed it. Don't know how I passed that. I did not study. Maybe a week before the bar, I started studying.
Wow.
That was the luckiest draw ever.
Wow.
That was lotto level. And so I decided that I would pick up and move to
To
Dallas,
Dallas.
Texas, because in Dallas, Texas, both my brothers had moved there already.
Right.
And everyone else may hate me in my mind, but my brothers love me.
Right.
That's why I moved to Dallas.
Right.
I moved in with my brother Mark.
Yes.
I hadn't taken the Texas bar yet. And I began working. I worked for Mark.
Right.
Not as a lawyer, just doing some odd jobs at his company while I started preparing for the bar. And then in 1987, the summer of 1987, I discovered the one thing that allowed me for 15 seconds or 20 seconds to look in the mirror and love myself. And that's all I ever wanted. That look in the mirror and all those kids at Pitt Law loved me, my mother loved me, my dad loved me, and all my friends loved me, the kids who bullied me loved me. I discovered cocaine. I did my first line of cocaine in the bathroom of a hotel in Dallas, Texas in 1987 and instantly became addicted.
Right.
Instantly. Not dependent, that's different, biologically.
Right.
Became psychologically addicted to looking in the mirror and this feeling of self-love.
Right.
Looking back, you have to remember, when you have someone who just spent his entire life looking in that mirror and just becoming nauseous because he so despised that person and having this emptiness in your stomach, then all of a sudden this artificial feeling of self-love came in.
You latch onto it.
I latched onto it, and I had to have that feeling again and again and again. Became psychologically addicted to cocaine.
Right.
I would later become biologically dependent on it, and I would go through a brutal detox. And so cocaine and alcohol took over my life. I failed the Texas bar twice, both because drugs and alcohol were more important than studying. The first time I took the Texas bar, my study aids were some Barbie books I got that day, in this raunchy motel outside of Fort Worth, Texas, a fifth of Jack Daniels, 3.5 ounces of cocaine, and a liter of Tab. Those were my study aids for the Texas bar. Think I passed?
No. Not at all.
And the second went down the same way. And during those times, I worked as a claims adjuster. I did things I didn't need to have for the bar exam.
You didn't need to be a licensed attorney.
I didn't need to be a licensed attorney. That's right. So I did those things. And I kind of enjoyed it. And so I enjoyed adjusting claims and doing those things. And then it was in 1998, I decided I wanted to do something else. I went out on my own. I finally passed the bar. I went out on my own, and I became a alcoholic, suffering from cocaine addiction, with an eating disorder.
You still had your eating disorder?
Yes, ambulance chaser.
Okay.
And I use that term tongue-in-cheek because it has a stereotype, but there are a lot of incredible plaintiffs' attorneys out there who do incredible work. But I was your classic, put in the dictionary ambulance chaser, taking cases I had no business taking, just to fund my drug habit and my alcohol, taking anything I could, walking the ethical line, crossing the ethical line. I kid when I speak. I say, well, you all have to be wondering, well, how does this guy still have his license? I said, well, it was never suspended. I haven't been disbarred, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. And I say that tongue in cheek, but when law students who are suffering from mental health issues, whether it's alcohol, opiates, clinical depression, whatever it may be, don't tell anyone, and they keep kicking that can down the road because they're afraid of character and fitness. They're afraid they won't get to take the bar exam with their class. They're afraid if they go to their dean of students, he's going to rat them out to C and F.
Everybody's going to know that
everyone's
you have a
going
problem.
to know. I'll never get a job. I'll never get work.
People will judge me.
But I cannot do anything and just kick that can down the road and take that bar exam and get through that. And before you know it, that can is kicked again and again and again. And before you know it, you're Brian Cuban or Joe Fiskunis, with another problem. And so that's what happens. That's what I see. And that's what and I won't even say I kicked the can because I was very good at telling myself I didn't even have a problem. There was a different time there was no self-awareness. We have more self-awareness nowadays, but we still have the stigma where the law students don't want to say anything. So it was a different stigma back then. But we still have it.
It still carries in our culture, I think.
There's absolutely a stigma. I see it. There's absolutely a stigma. I see it every day. I talk to law students. I talk to lawyers. And it becomes a lot easier to wait because you never envision that the consequences will catch up with the problem. And one of the hardest conversations I have with a struggling law student or struggling lawyer is to bring them to a place where they understand that if there is not recovery, if there is not treatment, It may not be now.
Right.
It may not be here. It may not be there, but the consequences will catch up to the problem.
Right.
Whether it's a failed marriage,
Right.
whether it's a DWI,
Mm-hmm.
right here, whether it's conduct, malpractice,
Right.
all of a sudden it becomes acceptable to take money from your client's trust account.
Right.
You tell yourself that.
These things are okay.
It's
I don't have a
okay.
problem.
It's okay because dealing with where I am and surviving, these are the things I need to do to survive.
Exactly.
So we adjust our moral plane, we adjust our normal,
Right.
and we do these things. And then all of a sudden, your license is at risk. All of a sudden, your freedom's at risk. But as law students and lawyers, we look here. No, that's not me. That'll never
Right.
be me. That'll never be. Well, let's ensure that it isn't you
Right.
by dealing with it here and not here.
Right.
Because I will tell you something. There is no, when someone's struggling and they're not in recovery, there is no such thing as a high-functioning law student.
Right.
There is no such thing as a high-functioning lawyer. There is no such thing. What there is are levels of reduction in functioning.
Right.
And what happens is, I call it the Peter Principle of recovery.
Okay.
We tell ourselves that we readjust what is normal. We
Right.
readjust our perception of high functioning.
Right.
So even though our level of achievement drops and drops and drops, we shrink and
Mhm.
shrink and shrink to keep getting under that.
Right.
And say,
I'm
"Oh,
doing well.
I'm doing well.
I'm doing what I need to do.
I got that C." Well,
Right.
if you'd done it up here, it might have been an A or a B
Right.
plus. So we keep expanding the work. We keep adjusting our what we define as high functioning.
Right.
And then it may be getting to a point where it's going like this. Other students are seeing it. They don't know
Right.
what to say. Professors may see it. The law library may see it. What do we say? There's the other struggle.
Yeah.
That struggle is real. We don't
Right.
know what to say. How do we address that? We see it. We see
You
it.
don't say anything to anybody ever.
I have my own problems.
Right. I don't want to get involved.
I have my own. What if I'm wrong?
Right.
And the professors, I'm wrong. The professors, I'm working on my next published paper.
Right.
I don't have time for that. Not all of them are like that, but some of them are.
Somebody else will take care
Yeah,
of it.
somebody else will take care of that. And then all of a sudden it's boom. Then there
Right.
is conduct. Then you are not then you are not getting your license.
Right.
Okay. Then you have these issues
Right.
because conduct occurs. Then it is a problem. Getting somebody to a point of recovering at the highest possible level is not easy
Right.
because we have this concept of rock bottom.
Right.
We are not ready until the worst happens.
Exactly.
No.
You're ready
We-
whenever you're ready.
You're ready whenever you're ready, but let's at least try to see if ready is here.
Right,
And
and
you
not
may
down.
not be ready here. I'm a perfect example. In 2005, I came close to taking my own life.
Okay.
Very close. It was close. I wasn't ready then. I went right back out. My brothers took me to a psychiatric facility. I went right back out. The only
What?
thing I learned from that is now they know I have the distance. But then in 2007, I was ready after a drug and alcohol-induced blackout. Why then and why now? I don't know.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean we have to wait for someone to hit that. We can empower them at every possible level. We can't force them to do anything,
Right.
but we can empower them at every possible level to give them the opportunity to say, I'm ready.
Exactly. After that day in 2007, was there anything that prompted you to say, okay, this is it?
Yes, there were three things that prompted me. First was, this was my second trip to a psychiatric facility.
Right.
The first was, the first was, there wouldn't be a third trip back because I'd be dead.
Right.
That crossed my mind. The second was, it was that my girlfriend at the time, who should have left, we'd been living together for just 2 weeks. She'd moved in, we'd been dating about a year, and I hid my problems from her, and she decided to stand by me. So I wanted to, I didn't want to lose her.
Right.
And the third thing was my father. I thought about my father in that parking lot and something he would say to me, myself and my two brothers growing up here in Pittsburgh, in Mount Lebanon. He'd say, guys, and he'd be joking, of course. Wives may come and go. And we hope not, he's kidding. Girlfriends may come and go. But when that push comes to shove, all you have is each other. No matter where you go in life, no matter what happens, you pick up the phone and you tell your brother you love him. You ask your brother if there's anything you can do for him.
Right.
you make sure you were there. And I thought about that, and I thought about that bond of family that my father instilled in us over the decades. My father was the middle of 3 boys. He and his older brother fixed cars in Dormont, PA from the end of the Korean War until his brother passed away over 40 years.
Wow.
They fixed cars.
Yeah.
And it was like a bad marriage sometimes, but they loved each other.
Right.
And he has a younger brother who lives in Palo Alto. I thought about that, and I realized at that point that I wasn't ready to lose my family.
Right.
Because families may love us unconditionally, and we hope they do, but there are probably going to be limits, on their willingness to watch their loved ones destroy their lives, and if they're not going to at least be willing to at least try. And families distance,
Right.
because they don't want to be a part of their loved one destroying
Right.
their life.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean they don't love us.
Right. But they don't want that.
That's right. And I saw that was happening in my family. I wouldn't want me around my nephews drunk
Right.
or coked up, right? I get it.
Were they distancing themselves from
And
you?
I was distancing from them.
Okay.
And I realized that the gift my father gave us,
Mhm.
I didn't want to lose that, standing in that parking lot. And if you want to know how that gift took, what that truly meant, all these decades later,
Mhm.
Mark, Dallas, Texas, Mark, Jeff, my younger brother, and I, Jeff is my younger brother,
Right.
sorry. Mark, my younger brother, and I, Jeff, all live walking distance to each other. And until my father
Really?
passed away in July, he lived across the street from me.
Really?
I mean, literally, not even metaphorically. He lived across the street from me.
Right.
So we all live walking distance to each other within
Wow.
about a 1.5 mile radius.
Wow.
That's
That's
how that
amazing.
took. That is how that gift of family stuck. And I didn't want to lose that. That's why.
Right.
And I decided it was time. So the next day, I walked into my psychiatrist's office, who I'd been lying to get my medication, my antidepressant medication. That's all I cared about.
Mhm.
Why would you lie to your psychiatrist? Well, shame knows no hourly rate, right?
Exactly.
So I finally got honest with him about everything but the eating disorder. Because I was still, at that point I knew I had an eating disorder, but I was ashamed as a guy to talk to him about it.
Right.
And so we talked about residential treatment. Said, I'm not going. There are no lawyers in residential treatment, right? They're full of lawyers.
Right.
But my ego and pride was up there. I had no cases.
Right.
My career as a lawyer was gone.
Right.
And we can talk about a little bit about that too. But so I ended up going to 12-step, and I walked into 12-step on April 8th, 2007. And then combined with counseling, I've been able to bring myself to a point where I'm coming up on 12 years sober, where I have
Wow.
not had a drink, I have not used cocaine, and I have not binged and purged.
Good.
So
I'm so happy.
thank you. And that is how that all went. But in between that, I lost my career as a lawyer. I was doing cocaine in the bathroom of the firm I worked at. I was doing cocaine at the federal courthouse, the state courthouse, exposing myself to prison. I didn't care because addiction's not about, one of the definition of addiction is basically obsessive compulsive drug seeking behavior
Right.
in the face of consequences, probable consequences, right?
Right.
So that's what addiction is, and those were possible
That's-
consequences, but that wasn't.
It didn't cross your mind.
No, it crossed my mind, but the need to get the drugs were more powerful. No,
Right.
it crossed my mind.
Okay.
It absolutely
It did.
crossed my mind, but it was
Lower on the tier of importance.
absolutely. So I ended up basically having no clients left, and it ended up to the point where I went to work for Mark.
Okay.
And Mark put me to work for him, and I failed in that miserably because I was showing up at meetings drunk and hungover and high on cocaine. And I was, it eventually got to the point where I was literally almost destitute, and Mark had to step in, as my father had always preached to us, and make sure that I wasn't living under a bridge.
Right. Right.
And I acknowledge that I had that privilege.
Mhm.
A lot of people do not have that privilege. Most people do not have that privilege. That I had a billionaire brother who stepped in, and people say, well, he was enabling you. Well, we look at enablement in the rearview mirror, right? Based
Right.
on how it turned out.
Right.
Enablement got me sitting here talking to you. So it was good.
Yeah, that was good
It was
enabling.
That's right. But it was privilege, and I had that privilege. A lot of people don't have that privilege.
Right. What led you to not go back to the law and to start helping people and talking to people about their own struggles?
Well, we have to go back to the point that I never wanted to be a lawyer. I absolutely,
True.
it made me, stepping in courtrooms made me ill. It was, I'm not a person who likes to be in court, or, I had to get high to go to a courtroom, which I
Right.
did. And I was somebody who was more of a helper in other ways. And I'm somebody who wears I'm somebody who wears his emotion on his sleeve.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes I even think almost like what they call them empaths, right? I'm
Right.
somebody who sees a squirrel in the road, hit, and my week is ruined.
Right.
Things like that. Cries at movie trailers.
Right.
And I was always somebody who was more about feeling than thinking.
Okay.
And we are a profession of thinkers.
Right. We are.
Right? We are not a profession of feelers. If you look at the Myers-Briggs, only 4% of lawyers surveyed, and there's a study on this, are feelers in the
Wow.
Myers-Briggs. And I'm a feeler. I'm part of
Right.
that. Doesn't mean you can't be a successful lawyer as a feeler, but it wasn't combine that.
I'm a
with,
feeler in my
There.
Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, see? And, what we are in terms of that, whatever you want to place on the Myers-Briggs, right? But it may gravitate us towards certain aspects of the
Right.
law and things like that. And it just came to a logical conclusion of what I like to do. And I get satisfaction knowing that I may have just helped one person find recovery.
Right.
And it started out long before I got involved with the legal aspect of this. My first advocacy was about body image and eating disorders.
Mhm.
Okay, so where I was going and talking to people about eating disorder recovery,
Right.
and out there as a guy with an eating disorder trying to bring other guys to recovery and break the stigma.
Right.
But as I went through that and became a recovery advocate, I was thinking a lot about what I went through in law school and as a lawyer, and I started looking around to see what's been addressed about this. And I came across a couple old books and a study from 1990, and I realized that no one's talking about this, or if they
Right.
are, it's a quiet conversation.
Right.
So I decided it was time to amplify the conversation, and that's what tripped me into working with it in the legal profession.
It's amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
For being the voice to help us law students.
Thanks. Is
be
there anything
able
you want to
talk
ask? You
about
allowed
it.
me to monologue.
No, you're fine. I asked my questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
Well,
me.
thank you, Brian. Check out our next episode. See you then.